In this video, we're going to be giving an overview of Matillion ETL. In this case, my underlying data warehouse, which Matillion is utilising, is Snowflake. If I come up to the top right of the screen here, we'll find the Partner Connect icon. You can then scroll down and you can find Matillion from here. There's also the Matillion data loader. The one we're interested in for this video is Matillion ETL. When you first open Matillion ETL, you'll be prompted to join a project. Projects are stored within the project group. In this case, this has been called Eyecademy. Now here I've got 4 different projects, one for development, one for testing, one for production and one for job demos. Now this last one here is what I'm going to be using in this video, just to show an orchestration job and a transformation job in action. If we just go a bit deeper into the different projects, we go down one step and we'll have default here. Now these here are the versions for each project. I haven't actually saved any new versions. The only one that will show up here is the default. This happens automatically. You see, I haven't actually stored any other versions for these projects, and so this will show for every single one. Once you click into the version, you'll then see the folders. Each of these folders contains different jobs. On the left hand side of the screen here, this is what you'll see. In this case, I've got job demos open. So if you click into job demos, click into the default version, then see the 2 jobs available. Now this first part at the top here, where we've got 3 different folders for the staging layer, the data warehousing and reporting, is to do with the Matillion ETL best practices. What I've got here, I've got a different section for each department in the company, but this stuff I'll go on towards the end after we've discussed each different job. In this instance, we'll use the job demos project and we'll select the default version. If we click OK, the project will open and we'll see the jobs on the left hand side of the screen here. You see there's also 3 other tabs here: a component section, shared jobs and environments. We'll go through each of these one by one, but for now we'll focus on the job section. We'll instantly see here there's 2 different icons. There's one that's blue and there's one that's green. If we right click, we can see there's 2 different types of jobs. There's an orchestration job, there's also a transformation job. If we open up this orchestration job, this here is a sample Matillion workflow, otherwise known as a job. A job is really just a workflow. Matillion ETL is actually slightly different from some of the other tools out there in that it's actually an ELT process rather than an ETL. What this means is that it extracts and loads the data and then uses the power of the underlying cloud data warehouse to perform the transform. You're creating 3 different tables. In this example, there's a airport staging table, a US state table, and then they're then loading the data from S3 into this table. Taking this upper section as an example, here we've used the create table tool. I'll go into these in a bit more detail soon. On the left hand side here, you can create a table. You just drag and drop this into the workflow. What this has done, it's selected the database to store the table in, selected the schema to store the table. Here we've got environment default. We'll also go into this in a bit more detail, but for each environment we can select a default schema and we can also set a default database as well. We've created a new table called Matillion Stage Airports. We've also defined the columns, gave it the variant type. If we click on text mode, we can actually put the data in a text format rather than just writing it in using the UI. This creates a table. I've just run the job, and if you click onto the tools, you can see that in the environment default, here we've got the default, and we look in the tables. You can now see 3 different tables have been created. If we now look at loading the data in, we use the S3 load tool. What this does is it copies data from S3 into our underlying data warehouse, our cloud data warehouse. In this case, this is Snowflake. So we select our S3 object prefix. This is just defining whereabouts in S3 our data is stored. We then select a pattern, if it's stored in a specific folder, or if there's a specific name for the file. And then also if there's a specific file type we like, we can define this here. Similar to before, we've selected a warehouse, a database and a schema to load into using. We then select the table we'd like to move it into. Again, we created this table here and called it Matillion Stage Airports. If we look at the S3 load tool, we have selected this Matillion S3 Airports table as the one to load the data into. We can also select the columns we would like to load in. So this was originally over on this side. We've just selected it so that this column will be loaded in. Once these 3 tiles have successfully run, use the AND command and then run the transformation job. This transformation job is shown up here. This will only run if and only if each one of these have been successful. Not going to go into too much detail about transformation jobs, but really what it's doing is it's taking this data we've loaded in from all different sources, can then perform different transformations on it. In this example, the data loaded in is in JSON format, so we flatten the JSON, we clean up the data, use the calculator tool to add current timestamp, can then remove duplicate rows. A join tool is then used to create a lookup to the US state. Now the reason I'm not going to go into too much detail here is just because there's so many different tools here that we can use. You can see here, lots of different tools. And the configuration is similar to the orchestration jobs. You can select a name and we also have all the other attributes related to that specific tile. And then the output here, we've created a new table using the table output. Hopefully this gives a good overview of what each of the jobs do. The orchestration jobs here will mostly be using the staging layer to move data from all the different sources into our data cloud platform. Transformation jobs will then be used to transform this data into a format for analytics or reporting. If we now move on for the jobs and have a look at the components. There's different components here for the orchestration job and for the transformation job. If we actually have a look at the orchestration job first, you can see there's lots of different folders here. One for AWS. Got lots of different connectors here. You can load data in from lots of different sources. You can see here. You can also bring a tool for extracting data from APIs. I'm not going to get into too much detail about how we do this, but just so you know it's there. We can also unload data. You can see here there's an S3 unload, for example. This would mean that we're moving data from our cloud platform into Amazon S3. We've also got different tools here for creating tables, creating streams, deleting tables, creating a custom SQL script, and also creating and altering external tables. if we had to look again at our orchestration job, we had this AND tool here, meaning that we can set conditions for a specific tile to run. Or we can also see here, we can set it so that a job terminates, or we can end a job in success. And there's a few others here. Also got the Google Cloud Platform tool. We've also got iterate here. One example of using this would be for loading multiple files in from a destination. Load and unload. Similar to up here, we can load in data from S3. You get a Python script and a Bash script. This one for Snowflake, we can alter the warehouse, so we can size up or we can size down the warehouse depending on the workload. For this, for example, we could size up the warehouse at the start and then size it down at the end, meaning it would only be sized up for the duration of the workflow. We then have transactions. We can also then run transformation or run orchestration. In this example, we've also got a run transformation at the end, meaning this, once this orchestration job runs and it's completed and it's successful, it will then run the transformation job here. The bottom two also have variables and we have wizards. Now I'm not really going to go into too much detail here. This is really just to give an overview of some of the different tools. The next section here is shared jobs. These work almost like macros. These are slightly more complicated, but the basic gist of it is, if we took this one for example, where got lots of different variables here, but maybe only one of these variables is changing each time. We could create a job where we could drag in a tile and maybe only two variables would change. For example here, if this is going to be run many times, we might only want to define a couple of these different properties here. So we might just want to define what the new table name will be, what the S3 object prefix will be, and what the pattern will be. The shared jobs will show up here. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail. That's really what they do. They simplify a few tiles into one tile and get a few less properties. Next section here is the environment section. We'll have a look at these two. I've currently got a demo environment and a job demos environment. Within this environment, I've got three separate schemas because of the default database I've chosen. In the environment, we can select the credentials we would like for either AWS, GCP, or Azure. These places can be used for staging areas, or for example, you can use Amazon CloudWatch or Amazon Simple Queue Service, or SQS, for sending messages to the Amazon instance. It can also be used for setting the default warehouse as well as the default database and default schema. Here I've selected a default warehouse, a default database and a default schema for my tables to be stored in. You see the three separate schemas here. I've got a staging schema, I've got a data warehouse schema and a reporting schema. This just means that any staging tables will be stored in here, or views. Any tables for the data warehouse will be stored here, and any tables that will be used for reporting will be stored in here. I've got staging set as my default because most of the tables that I'll be bringing in will be stored in the staging area. Again, I won't go into too much detail on the environments. The next section is properties. We've already went into this quite a bit in each of these different tiles, so I'll skip over that. We'll move along to the SQL tab. The SQL tab is really just a way of writing the properties in a SQL format. We'll see this for each tool. if you have a look at the Create Tables tool, you're creating an or replace table in the demo database in this schema, and this will be the table name. I've also defined the field here as the type variant. We'll see this is exactly what we've got here. So here, if I was selecting a different environment, if I had a different environment on here, if I chose job demos environment, for example, I'd maybe have a different default database and schema, but this is what I'm currently using for this one. The next section along here is the export tab. Here we can export metadata about a specific tile. For example, we can say when it's completed. These are stored as a variable within our instance. One thing we need to make sure of is that the variable itself has the same type as this source variable. You can see here if I had completed that, for example, we would need that same variable to be stored as a date. These can be found up the top left of the screen up here. I'll just show a drop down quickly. We can edit them in this section here. The next tab along is the help tab. This gives us a bit more information about the tool. It also clears up any confusion over the definitions of specific properties. These 4 tabs make up this box here. We'll now move on to the task section. In the task section we can see whether a task has run successfully, or if it's validated successfully, or it has failed. You can see the environment the job ran in, the version of the project that it ran in, as well as the job name, when it was queued, and when it was completed. You can click into the task info to view more information about the task. You can see when it's completed, we can go through one by one and see how long each tile took to run. We can also see the rows processed where we're loading in data. We also had a part at the end of our workflow where we're wanting to run the transformation job straight afterwards. And we can actually view this within this job. You can see here 3364 as the row count. Task section can be useful to troubleshoot and see where the workflow is failing, or if there's more rows than there should be. We can also see where the tables were created in. The next box along is the search box. Here we can select keywords to search for. We can then check which box contains the keyword, or which tile contains the keyword. You see different ones have been highlighted each time. Next tab along is the console. This will be useful for any error messages or any commands that have been run in the workflow. Similar with the command log. The next section along is the notices, which just gives us a few updates on Matillion in general. We can click to expand these and we can view more. This really sums up Matillion. I hope you found this video useful.